Well, hey, Waspeteers, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. It's the last day of 2020. My fucking God, it's the last day of 2020. It's 5:40 as the time, Central U.S. time that I'm broadcasting this. So that gives us, 6 hours and 20 minutes left of this shit, and it'll finally be over. I saw a couple channels that I watched earlier this morning have put out their 2020 reviews, so I figure I'd kind of just do a brief one. Didn't really feel like going to the trouble of actually recording it. I'll just live stream it and get what I have to say out there. There's basically three components to my view of this last year, which ironically might have been the best year of my life. And it started off in kind of like a place of tragedy, but we'll start off. What's the good? The good of 2020 for me, it's the year that I met the love of my life and got married. Unfortunately, that kind of came towards the end of the year, and there's a lot of buildup that led to these things. So I guess in summation, 2019 ended on a really dark note for me. I'd had like some big Christmas plans. I was going to do like a Call of Cthulhu Christmas game for my YouTube channel and stuff. And then 2 days before Thanksgiving of that year, I find out at 8 o'clock in the morning when my dad had sent one of his musician friends to come, get hold of me because I hadn't been using Facebook and no one knew how to get hold of me easily, that my mom had died. And that kind of came out of nowhere, and there was a lot of emotions and feelings and whatnot. I'd spent several years kind of avoiding talking to her, just real minimal communication through Facebook Messenger, but haven't I'd spoken to her on a phone or had seen her in years, in large part because some various events. I didn't really want to have to get in with her why I was angry at her. So in a way, I was trying to spare her feelings, but I was also hurting her feelings by not talking to her. And then she died, and there's no way to resolve any of that. So, as I say, dark cloud fell over at the very tail end of my 2019. So in some ways, my own personal 2020 year of hell, it's a little offset from the actual 2020. 2020 itself began with one of my coworkers at a sister location from the restaurant that I work at, got stabbed to death by a homeless person who snuck in through the back of the kitchen and grabbed one of the kitchen knives and stabbed the manager, and also stabbed one of the kitchen personnel. The kitchen personnel died. This is relevant because of that incident, most of the people at that location quit, and they had to hire a bunch of new people. And one of the people they hired was the person who would then go on later that year to end up getting married to me. Through various reasons of, that she can describe it, her side of things is her side of things, so I'm not going to try to repeat her story. But long story short, she ended up getting transferred over to my store in May, and apparently had secretly fallen in love with me without me realizing it. This is already after the coronavirus had started, so we're all having to wear masks. And I'm just this big, grumpy, dark-mooded person. You can't see my face, and I'm just back in the kitchen by myself listening to loud, angry music all the time. Most of my other coworkers, are kind of a little scared of me. But for some reason, she found something about me that was intriguing. So she started looking me up online, and through looking at my Facebook, she discovered that I had a YouTube channel. And so apparently for several months in secret, she was watching my YouTube videos in the middle of the night and falling for me. Eventually, things do work out so that we did finally have a moment of communication. Really, the very second I actually saw her without her face mask on one day. I was coming into work and she was out back smoking a cigarette as I walk up, and there's just this kind of a moment between us, and flirtation went up higher. A couple days later, we actually worked up the nerve to talk to each other enough to decide to go out. By the end of that week, we had kind of decided to go ahead and get married. I ended up moving in with her and out of the trash hole that I had been living in for the last several years. And 2 months later, we actually tied the knot on Halloween. She's everything I'd ever if there was a perfect checklist of everything I wanted out of a companion, she fits it all. And apparently I do the same thing for her. So that's cool. And it's just weird that in the darkest chapter of my life, in the midst of this mini apocalypse we've all gone through, is of course this would be the time that I'd finally find the woman that I'm actually compatible with, and that kind of, as I always kind of figured it would be, we just kind of instantly just snap together and are together all the time, and I'm fine with that. It sucks that currently right now because of my chest injury, because we got into an auto wreck right before Christmas, and I broke several ribs, I'm stuck at home all the time for at least the next month. And this is like the longest period of time I've had to actually be separated from her since, we got together. And but yeah, she made up for so many things, and because of that, I do deem this to have been like probably the best year of my life, in spite of it starting off in a weird way, and the fact that like we never would have met if a guy hadn't been murdered and stuff like that. So what's the bad for 2020? Well, 2020 is the year that I've given up on Star Trek. I have a long love of the Trek series, and I'm not to say that I still don't like the old Treks. And I've recently discovered that they have a Star Trek role-playing game that is very excellent, researched and written to fit into the continuity of the Trek that we all know and love, and totally ignoring everything that CBS as All Access has been doing, which is ironic because they got the license to produce this game from CBS after CBS had started all this, because I believe the game first came out in 2017. But, I forced myself through seasons 1 and 2 of Discovery, trying really hard to find some way to like mentally spin it so that like I could justify that this wasn't as bad as I knew it was. And then Star Trek Picard came out, and I just couldn't do it anymore. It, like the scales fell from my eyes. It like it was more jarring seeing an actual character played by an actor that we knew in this new series to make it like show just how far off the track from Star Trek this stuff was. And I kind of just barely limped through watching the Lower Decks. And then the new 3rd season of Discovery came out, and about 4 or 5 episodes into it, it's not that there's anything in a particular episode where I'm just like, fuck this, I'm offended, and throw the table up in the air and screw these guys. I just couldn't keep watching it. I could not bring myself to want to pull the trigger to watch the next episode. And I guess I'm okay with that, but it's just weird. It's weird having to kind of come to terms with the fact that I'm just giving up on Star Trek, at least on new Star Treks, until they get rid of Alex Kurtzman and Secret Hideout, and they no longer have any control over the franchise. I'm not going to bother anymore. How many times are they going to slap us in the face before you realize it's just best to walk away? This isn't Star Trek. I even tried to get her to watch them, and she's not a big Trekkie or anything. Ironically, her father, who is a director of television shows, did direct at least one episode of The Next Generation. It was one of the things that when I first met her was like, really? Your dad directed a season 1 episode of TNG? That's amazing to me. But she finds it like it's not Star Trek. It's just has the Star Trek name and logo on it, but it's a different science fiction show. And if it didn't have the Star Trek name and logo on it, it's a science fiction show that would have been canceled before the first season had ever even finished being aired. But because they have the franchise branding that it has, they're like kind of like holding the entire Star Trek fan community by hostage almost, by making these things and making us have to keep supporting this thing that's bad, and it's degrading the very essence of what made Star Trek good and so appealing for so many people for so many years. They've just turned it into just melodramatic fluff with like no grasp of science or philosophy. It's just a bunch of people crying at each other and explosions and random action scenes. Like a lot of things that people had been complaining about this last season aren't really the things that it's just purely for me just about the storytelling. I don't care about, the trans messaging and the new Trill character. If there's any species in Star Trek that you should be having trans issues storytelling around, it's a Trill, so that's appropriate. It's nothing to do with any of that. I don't care that Michael Burnham's black. Like all that. Star Trek is supposed to be a future of humans with a giant, wide palette of variety, and that's okay. But the storytelling fucking sucks, and so I'm just not going to do it anymore. Until Alex Kurtzman is gone, until Secret Hideout is gone, I want nothing to do with Star Trek Discovery. And so, yes, to me, the worst thing about 2020 is that it was the year that I finally had to give up on my beloved of science fiction franchises. And so then what's the ugly of 2020? The ugly, the truth. We're a broken society. We're screwed up in the head. The conservatives are not conservative. The liberals are not liberal. It's all become team sports. They're constantly just chasing each other around by the tail. It's really hard to exist outside of that because people are always trying to drag you in. If you're not agreeing with them, you must be on the other team. The COVID thing, the eruption of all the Black Lives Matter riots, like all of it, like we all look really bad, all of us. And it reflects on all of us, even though those of us who have not participated in any of this stuff, because of the fact that we all are in the same boat. We're all damned by the activities of the slowest amongst us. And don't really know what to do about that. I will say, like, one thing I keep, like, really being annoyed about, especially in regards to the whole response to the COVID thing, is what the fuck have we been doing, spending trillions upon trillions of dollars on Homeland Security for? What was it good for? I thought they were supposed to have all these scenarios planned out for, potential bioterror attacks or, like artificial pandemics. I thought they had like had to run through all sorts of scenarios of all the things they're going to do with FEMA and the CDC. And it'd be just like some movie where if an outbreak happens, Dustin Hoffman shows up in one of those yellow hazmat suits and you got a bunch of National Guards in camouflage hazmat suits. And they're going to cordon off the whole neighborhood and put everyone in little plastic domes until they get it fixed. Well, as it turns out, that didn't fucking happen. What were we spending $20 trillion plus over the last 2 decades on this Homeland Security Department? And when something finally happens in this country, that's an actual big national emergency, they're completely just caught with our fucking pants cut down. Like, we should have had everything already set up where we like, okay, everyone's got to stay down for 2 to 3 weeks. An actual real honest lockdown that we only have to get through the one time instead of dragging it out for a fucking year plus now already with another year to go, according to the MIT projections. If we had all just actually seriously locked down and everyone and the army had like distributed emergency ration packaging to everyone in the country so that we could all like feed ourselves during this little narrow window of time and some moratoriums on people. So like, don't evict people as soon as, we're over this lockdown, we can go back to work and we're just going to pretend like these 3 weeks didn't happen. But that's not what we did. That's not what we did at all. Like for all the money that we waste on military spending, at least we actually have naval ships and tanks to show for it. But what the fuck was the point of Homeland Security? What's the point of it right now? All it's done is just line some people's pockets and created a whole level of bureaucracy that apparently is completely fucking useless. And so that's the ugly part of 2020. It's just really just revealed how full of fucking shit we are. We have this idea in our heads from movies and stories of this noble ideal of humanity, and it's a fucking lie. And at some point, I would just really enjoy it if human beings could just come to grips with the fact that we're brutal, violent, self-interested little animals and quit pretending that we're angels given flesh bodies or they were like handcrafted by God for some noble purpose. That's not the fucking case. It's driving us nuts. It gives us all sorts of weird ideas about morality, and morality seems to off way too many times throughout history. Moral hand-wringing has led to a lot of people being killed, which ironically is not very moral and is always looked at bad. I can speak more to the liberals not being liberal thing since I am more of a product of left-wing thinking. Like there's sentiments going around on Facebook and other platforms that just fly in the face of everything that is supposed to be about the philosophy of people who want an inclusive, diverse society. All like the Twisted Tea memes. And like I saw a classic Facebook page, Lizzie the Leslie posting a meme of like, make racists afraid again. If the left has gotten to a point where they're advocating rule through fear, they're not the left. And I think the real shadow trick to this whole fucking thing in this country, especially with our obsession over Nazism and fascism, is that both sides of this political divide are fascist. You either have on one hand, you got social fascists, and on the other hand, you have theocratic fascists. But there's really no one advocating for people just to be allowing to just to be themselves and not have to worry about having the wills of others imposed on them. And I don't know what to do about that. I'm not sure that 2021 is going to be some magic bullet to fix all this shit, because our years are kind of arbitrarily set. We just randomly chose to start counting the calendar when we chose it, and we just randomly chose where we're going to pinpoint where the year starts. Personally, I think the year should start at the fucking spring equinox. I don't know why we're doing it a week and a half after this winter solstice. It doesn't seem to like be based on anything concrete and physical within how reality functions. It's just an arbitrary start date. So 2020 isn't even real, and 2021 won't be real. And it's up to us to fucking just get off our fucking selves and quit. I don't even know. I kind of just want to like throw my hands up over it. Like, this is probably the most political video I've done in a while. So anyway, I guess that's all I wanted to say. My 2020 is great because I've found someone that I've been looking for a long time. I literally used to try to draw this woman. And after ripping out these old art and showing it to her, we were both like, holy shit, that does look like you. It's really weird. And it overshadows everything else. It overshadows the fact that Star Trek is a giant sinking disappointment. And it overshadows the fact that the world is a giant sinking fucking disappointment. And if I have a message for all of y'all who might be watching this for some insane reason, it's that things aren't really as bad as everyone wants it to be made out to be. There's a lot of people with a lot of agendas that want you to feel like the world is in this terrible state of crisis. And in truth, 2020 could have been so much worse. What if we had actually really gotten hit by a real bad pandemic? You know, something where 1 out of 3 people who catch it die. What if we really had a Republican fascist president? What if we really did have actual honest-to-God race riots where peoples are like at each other's throats murdering each other on mass scale over the summer? Everything that's occurred has been the most feather-light version of these things. This is the most mild and weatherable apocalypse we could have ever hoped for, and we should all be very thankful for this. But we're not going to be, because we're angry at people that we don't know for things that they didn't do, because I guess that's just who we are. So anyway, have a good New Year's, and go fuck yourselves. I don't know. Peace out.